Next on Link TV, Latin polls, news and analysis from Latin America as seen by Latin American media, followed by a panel discussion on the issues. Next on Latin polls, only on Link TV.
The following program is an original production of Link TV.
Today, it's a hot-button political issue, but it's also a cornerstone of the United States, immigration. But is illegal immigration a necessary evil or an impossible problem that has to be solved? This and more coming up next on Latin Polls. Hello and welcome to Pulso Latino. I'm your host, Ena Cuevas.
And that one day in this country, soon, we can pass comprehensive immigration reform.
The immigration issue in the United States is once again a hot topic of conversation. It's an election year, and the economy is in a downturn. The United States is a nation founded on immigration. However, with every new wave of immigrants, social and economic pressures often cause a backlash. This heats up the debate within the political arena. The most recent wave of immigrants, both legal and illegal, are from Latin America, with the majority coming from Mexico. Recently, the president of Mexico, Felipe Calderón, visited the U.S. He spoke about immigration to the California legislature.
The choice is not between migration and security or between migration and prosperity. The choice is between a future of integration and success for both or a future of distrust and resentment between us. The choice is ours, and the time is now. Let us work together.
In response to Calderón's speech, the Speaker of the California State Assembly, a Mexican-American, says he's optimistic about finding a solution to the illegal immigration issue.
And I will say that we also look forward to one day reaching the point where the racial biases that get in the way of people's thinking will no longer exist, so that we can continue in the mutual love, respect, and admiration that we have for one another, and that one day in this country, soon, we can pass comprehensive immigration reform.
As the November election approaches, the presidential candidates are speaking about the issue. Democratic candidate Barack Obama says improving Mexico's economy would help reduce the flow of illegal immigrants crossing the border.
To improve our relationship with Mexico and work with the Mexican government so that their economy is producing jobs on that side of the border.
The other candidate for the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, says technology combined with a stronger border patrol could help stem the flow.
There is technology that can be used instead of a physical barrier. It requires us having enough personnel along the border.
While visiting Chicago, Mexico's President Calderón suggested that organized crime is a greater threat to U.S. security than Mexican immigrants. He promised to improve his country's economy. This way, people wouldn't have to go north in search of a better life, as we see in this report from Latinoamérica TV.
Mi deber como presidente en momentos tan difíciles como los que ustedes pasan, de hostigamiento y discriminación, es hacerme eco de la voz de todos los mexicanos. El gobierno de México está dispuesto a trabajar muy duro para que la inmigración no sea en el futuro la única opción de la gente, dijo el mandatario. De esta forma, Calderón endulzó el oído de la comunidad mexicana con un discurso patriótico en el que destacó la contribución de los mexicanos al desarrollo económico de los Estados Unidos. Tenemos que trabajar fuerte para revertir el hostigamiento, desprestigio y a veces franca discriminación de los mexicanos, dijo Calderón. Asimismo, el mandatario mexicano afirmó que, lejos de ser una carga pública para Estados Unidos, los mexicanos contribuyen a la economía y, en particular, al sistema de pensiones de los trabajadores estadounidenses. En ese sentido, Calderón ofreció un plan de 5 puntos como parte de un esfuerzo para revertir el hostigamiento que sufren sus compatriotas en Estados Unidos. Si bien Calderón afirmó su compromiso con el reforzamiento de la seguridad fronteriza, enfatizó: no nos equivoquemos, no es la gente, es el crimen organizado y no los migrantes mexicanos los que son un problema para la seguridad nacional de los Estados Unidos.
In our studios to talk about the immigration issue is Alejandra Rincón, a writer who specializes in immigration issues. And from Washington, D.C., we are joined by John Amaya, legislative staff attorney for MALDEF, and Michelle Waslin, Senior Research Analyst at the Immigration Policy Center. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us here at Latin Pulse. Let's start with you, Ms. Rincon. Why is this issue of illegal immigration such a recurring one?
Well, I think that this country battles with this issue for many, many reasons. I mean, one of them is that immigration has grown exponentially since the mid-90s. There's a lot more immigrants. Of course, their contributions to the economy are very significant. And also their sense of dignity has now been shown from the past 2 years when they joined marches and a lot of demonstrations across the U.S. So I think that traditionally they've been here, they've been doing a lot of the work, but it was not till the last 2 years when people went out to the streets and started demanding dignity and a sense of fair treatment that it's in a way polarized more the debate because there's a lot of people that are not willing, ready to hear those who are working and toiling and being exploited to say, we're here and we demand to be treated fairly.
Mr. Amaya, a Time magazine 2006 poll indicated that 90% of Americans think that the issue of illegal immigration is a serious one. What kind of changes can we expect next year with a new administration in the White House?
Well, recently, we believe that regardless of which candidate would have been in the White House, we were going to see comprehensive immigration reform. The last three standing, up until recently, were all in favor of comprehensive immigration reform. But recently, we have seen that the McCain campaign is endorsing the current legislative proposals in the House of Representatives and the Senate, which are anti-immigrant bills. So assuming that a pro-immigration candidate takes over the White House next year, then we can definitely see some comprehensive reform.
But one of the things that is always mentioned is the distinction between, because you use the term anti-immigration, and I believe that the people on the other side of the debate would say they are not against immigration, but against illegal immigration.
Well, that's a tricky and sore subject because when you're talking about legal versus illegal, we're really talking about families who sit at the table every single night, and conceivably half the family is documented and half the family is not. So what they're trying to do is not just divide the country, they're trying to divide families.
What about the idea that Mexico and Central America somehow benefit by sending its poor and unemployed into the United States, especially in the form of the wire transfers and the amount of money that's being sent that way?
Well, certainly immigration policy and global migration are very complex issues, and we need to look at the push factors that are pushing people out of the sending countries, and we need to look at the pull factors that are pulling people toward the United States. And to really comprehensively address this problem, we need to deal with both of those. So certainly we need to deal with conditions in sending countries such as Mexico to improve their economy, to ensure that people who don't want to leave their country are able to stay and prosper. And here domestically in the United States, we need to create a new national immigration system for the 21st century that ends undocumented immigration and that fits the needs of America's economy and our values.
Ms. Rincon, what could be done in order to modify what Ms. Waslin refers to as an antiquated system?
Well, I think that actually beyond the immigration system in this country, I think that a lot of the challenges that when we talk about immigration and undocumented immigration, the debate begins at the border when the person crossed the border. But the debate does not begin there. The debate begins way back when the person, as she said, is pushed out of their country. And it's not so much, it's a combination of the conditions in Mexico, but the conditions that the United States has imposed on countries that it has quote-unquote fair trade with. There is no fair trade, and as we know, NAFTA imposed the end to corn subsidies, so that pushed a whole group of population of peasants really to going into the cities and all that. I mean, it is the main subsidy in Mexico, and so once you end the subsidy to corn, and if it's the main staple, you're going to be pushing a really large number of people onto the United States. I mean, some of those things are planned. The United States needs, that undocumented labor. It needs those workers in those conditions. If those workers were not undocumented, they wouldn't be working for those low wages that they are.
But Mr. Amaya, could you say that somehow that's taking the responsibility off of, let's say, the Mexican government? You can't blame it on the United States and say that it is the U.S. policy that is causing this to happen without looking at what Mexico is doing to create those conditions in its country.
Conceivably, but we also need to look at what corporate America is doing. We are in a situation where there is a shortage of labor. And so it's not just that we're pushing people out of Mexico or other countries, we're luring people because these opportunities exist. People would not come here otherwise.
But once again, there's no examination as to what Mexico can do or what Mexico is doing to try and fix its economic situation so that those conditions don't exist.
Well, certainly, and we should absolutely look into those conditions, and we both need to sit down at the table, the U.S. government, the Mexican government, but the rest of Latin America, and figure this out together. We can't work this immigration debacle in isolation and think that the United States has all the answers.
Given our, and this is for Ms. Waslin, given our historic roots and our image as a haven for the oppressed, and since the United States was based on immigrants, do you think the U.S. will ever be able to stop the flow of illegal immigration?
Yeah, I think that we can. In the past, we certainly have slowed the flow of undocumented immigration. It really depends on the laws that are in place at the time. We need to fix our current laws because as they are now, they really encourage undocumented immigration. We have employers that are hiring undocumented immigrants. We have family members here in the United States that don't have legal channels to bring their immediate family members to the United States. We really need to update our current immigration system so that we can minimize undocumented immigration and ensure that everybody that we want and need here in the United States comes legally.
But that is part of the debate. It is not possible or not practical to legalize everybody who is here without any kind of consequence, and that is one of the things that's being advocated by some of the presidential candidates. So how would you propose legalizing the large numbers of undocumented workers that are in the United States?
Right. I don't think that anybody believes that practically, financially, we can deport 12 million people. We need to find a way to integrate them into our communities. I believe that there is a way that we can require people to come forward, register with the government, pay their taxes, prove that they are learning English, pay a fine, go through a security background check, and that way they can receive their papers to live here legally. And that will benefit not only those immigrants, but it will also benefit American workers who won't have unfair competition from a vulnerable group of workers in this country.
But immigration is not only a political issue, it has a human side as well. With so many people trying to cross into the U.S. and the Border Patrol with a duty to stop them, the area between Mexico and the United States is becoming increasingly violent, as we see in this report from Mexico's Once Noticias.
En los últimos 2 años y medio, Estados Unidos aumentó 300% el presupuesto para proteger la frontera y armó a sus agentes con balas de goma y gases lacrimógenos y pimienta. La violencia también se gesta en suelo mexicano. Los traficantes de personas utilizan cada vez más la agresión para romper el cerco policíaco.
Los polleros o traficantes de personas están distrayendo a la policía fronteriza, atacándola, y esta responde a estas agresiones. Y eso lo hacen para distraerlos e irse por otro lugar en lo que la policía fronteriza está en un punto específico.
Para algunos analistas, frenar esta violencia es una responsabilidad compartida. México debe poner un alto a los traficantes de personas y Estados Unidos no debe criminalizar a los indocumentados.
One of Mexico's main sources of revenue comes from the billions of dollars Mexican nationals in the U.S. send back to their families. As a result, Mexicans on both sides of the border are following the U.S. economic downturn very closely.
Las remesas que enviaron al país los mexicanos que viven en el exterior ascendieron a cerca de 24,000 millones de dólares durante el 2007. Aunque esta cifra representa un máximo histórico, también significa una desaceleración importante en su ritmo de crecimiento.
Las remesas, como sabemos, pues es un rubro ya muy importante en la cuenta corriente de la balanza de pagos y por lo tanto es un mecanismo, es un factor que apuntala la condición económica global en México.
A pesar de que ya son la segunda fuente de ingresos externos para el país, no hay una cantidad suficiente de remesas para sustituir la labor que tiene que hacer el Estado en México y los empresarios para detonar la transformación económica del país.
Actualmente el 80% de las remesas que llegan a México se destina al consumo de las familias.
As the U.S. economy slows down, illegal immigrants have a harder time finding jobs. This makes it difficult for them to send money home. This dwindling revenue is important to El Salvador's economy, which creates a catch-22. As its economy slows, more Salvadorians head north looking for jobs that are already hard to find. Here is this report from El Salvador's Canal 12.
En la entrevista al día, ambos expertos dijeron que debido a que la economía salvadoreña está dolarizada, podría registrar problemas a consecuencia de la recesión económica estadounidense, cuyos efectos inmediatos serían la reducción de las remesas y las exportaciones.
Por supuesto, la gente va a tener menos ingresos y lo que queda remanente para mandar a los países de origen a su familia tiende a contraerse.
No solo hay desempleo, sino que hay una coyuntura de política anti-inmigrante.
Los analistas económicos también consideraron que la población debe tomar medidas en su economía familiar, con el fin de poder enfrentar cualquier variación económica en el país.
Mr. Amaya, one of the solutions has been this border fence between Mexico and the United States. Do you believe this will be effective, or is it just another Band-Aid solution?
It's absolutely just a Band-Aid solution. Fences don't keep people out, fences keep people in. And the reality is that there are economic obstacles, there are environmental obstacles, and there are property rights obstacles that will not allow this fence, this wall, to ever be completed. Just recently, we learned from the Washington Post in an article last week that the electronic surveillance, this virtual fence, that was supposed to be so effective and technologically advanced doesn't work. Weather conditions are setting it off. So if weather is setting off a technologically advanced system, we certainly have bigger problems on our hands.
Ms. Rincon, one of the most popular media figures today is CNN's Lou Dobbs, and he has taken a position of being anti-illegal immigration. How difficult does this make it for policymakers, or how much does that influence what people think and the way that that they handle this immigration issue?
Well, I think that figures like him have definitely polarized the debate. I mean, of course, being on a major channel, you know, and using the media that he is, of course, he's going to, in a way, control, you know, the American mind and be feeding this over and over. So there is kind of like a nonstop war in the media, feeding the image of the illegal, and of course, you know, not the undocumented immigrant, not the person that has come here to work, that is holding 2 or 3 jobs, that has children who are U.S. citizens, but it's this imagery of the terrorist, of the person who's here breaking the law. And so I think that makes it hard for a lot of the pro-immigrant forces, because we don't always have the space to address the issues that we think are important, but also because we have put on the defensive. I think they have controlled the debate, they have framed the terms of the debate, and simply when it comes to things of amnesty, we're basically saying, no, you know, we don't think it's feasible, no, it's just not so many, it's only this few. We have been put on the defensive, kind of like apologizing for the presence of these workers here, when these workers have been, as our colleague from Maldives said, lured to come into this country, and this country benefits tremendously from their presence.
What about those who say that it creates a big pressure on the U.S. economy? We're talking social services, we're talking education, we're talking about taking away jobs that are already scarce when the economy goes into a recession.
Well, I think that's also part of a little bit of the mythology of the impact of these workers, and a lot of it is fed by these forces who are not using or basing their arguments on research. If you look at just the Social Security Administration has released a study indicating that from 1937 to 2000, they came up with this figure of $374 billion in something that they call the earnings suspense file. That's money that has been allocated for years in this file, but it's not claimed by anyone because it's believed is money that was worked by undocumented workers who got their monies taken off their paychecks but will never be able to claim the money. As of 2005, they believe that amount is $519 billion. So the whole idea that they do not contribute to Social Security, that they do not pay taxes, is ludicrous. I mean, they do. They sales taxes. We don't go to the store and say, I'm undocumented, I'm not going to pay the sales tax. You do pay the sales tax. You pay when you pay rent, you're paying taxes. When they own a home, they're paying taxes. So it's, again, the issue of them controlling the debate and forcing a lot of that data that is not supported by anything, but just by their anti-immigrant stance.
But the reality is there are billions of dollars leaving the United States economy in the form of the wire transfers and the remittances that they send to their families in Latin America. What about that money?
Correct. Well, that money is basically supporting those families and a lot of, the services that those governments should providing. I think it's about $300 billion worldwide that immigrants send back to their country. So you have a population here that is supporting their countries back home, that is supporting the economy here, and that is somehow kind of like, quote unquote, making it in this country. So I understand, the figures and the economic debate, but you cannot negate the fact that they are contributing and that money that they're sending back, I mean, you have basically two economies on the back of these workers. I mean, their home countries and the government here, and of course the business, because they represent billions of dollars for the economy here.
Ms. Romaya, the revenues that Mexico receives are the second source of income after oil. Why is it the responsibility of the American taxpayer then to support the Mexican economy that way?
Well, the thing that we need to remember is that remittances aren't just going to Mexico. They're going to Europe, they're going to Africa, they're going to Australia and China. So to isolate Mexico and blame this shortage, if you will, of revenue that could be staying within our borders is scapegoating the Mexican government and the Mexican people and Latinos generally. And let's also remember that the remittances that are going aren't just going from undocumented individuals. They're going out there from legal permanent residents and U.S. citizens.
But the reality is that the percentage of how important it is for Australia is not the same as it is for Mexico. We're talking the second source of revenue as well as for El Salvador. So it is a more important, or it has it takes a bigger portion of what it means for the economy of those particular countries.
Certainly, which goes back to my earlier point, which is to say that that's why it's so important that we sit down with other governments, Mexico and Latin American countries generally, and try to solve this immigration problem collectively. We can't be making these decisions alone. We can't be pointing fingers because we're all in this together.
Ms. Waslin, if economic downturns both here and in other countries are going to increase the number of people who want to come into the U.S. for a better life, isn't it in America's best interest to improve the quality of life in those countries?
Well, as we've been saying, yes, I think that it is part of America's responsibility to work in conjunction with sending countries around the world to improve situations, the economy, political conflict, etc., so that people are not forced to leave their country and come to the United States. You talk about economic downturn. Currently we have a very low unemployment rate, and undocumented immigrants continue to come to the United States. I think that this is just more evidence that we need to fix our immigration system so that those workers that we need here in the United States can come legally. When we need more workers, we can increase those numbers, and when we need less workers, we can decrease those numbers and do so legally.
How realistic, though, is it that the United States would be able to help these countries in Latin America improve their economies?
Well, I'm not an expert in international relations and international trade, but I certainly believe that the U.S. needs to take more responsibility in this arena. every time that we interact with Latin American countries, for example, through our trade relations, through our political relations, we need to think, what is the migration consequence of this activity? We need to incorporate thinking about migration into all of our activities. And as John has been saying, we need to proactively meet with leaders in other countries to figure out what are our common needs and where can we work together. I know presidents of Mexico have been here in the United States several times over the last years. They are trying to work out a deal with the United States, some type of binational immigration reform. And our Congress only seems interested in passing Band-Aids, deportation-only policies that aren't getting us anywhere towards a solution. I think that we need to look to our leadership and demand that they be more responsible and that they work towards realistic, practical, fair solutions to this problem.
Well, it seems like the solution will require both countries. I trust you enjoyed today's program. I'd like to thank our guest here in San Francisco, Alejandra Rincon, a writer who specializes on immigration issues. And in Washington, D.C., John Amaya, legislative staff attorney for MALDEF, and Michelle Waslin, senior research analyst at the Immigration Policy Center. I will also like to thank you at home or on the web for being with us today. We would also like to thank American University in Washington, D.C., and the students at the School of Communication for helping with the research for this program. Join us next time when we take a closer look at Latin America through the eyes of Latin American media. For more information about Pulso Latino and Latin America, log on to linktv.org. I'm Ana Cuevas. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time here on Latin Pulse.
Latin Pulse was made possible by support from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Pulso Latino es posible gracias al apoyo de John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation y el William and Flora Hewlett Foundation.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs that connect you to the world.